My parents always favored my sister, even refusing to buy me a prom dress while they spent $3,000 on hers. So I didn't go. 3 years later, she bumped into me backstage at a fashion show. Laughing, she whispered, "Stealing clothes now?" Until the designer turned and said, "She's our lead stylist. You're just an influencer we rejected." So, this story really isn't about a prom dress. Or even a fashion show. It's about growing up invisible in your own home. It's about being the other daughter. The one who never got picked first or even picked at all. And yes, it ends with a little poetic justice, but it didn't start that way. Let me rewind to the part that really hurt the most. I was 17. High school senior in Charleston, South Carolina. Everyone was buzzing about prom. Girls had Pinterest boards, dress fittings, hair trials. My sister, Brielle, was a senior too, born 11 months before me. Irish twins. But you'd think we were from different universes. Brielle had already picked out her venue for pre-prom photos. She had a date from the lacrosse team, a hotel suite with her girlfriends, and a custom-made dress imported from Italy that cost $3,000. I remember the receipt on the kitchen counter. And then there was me. I didn't have a date. I didn't want one either. What I wanted more than anything was to wear something I designed. I had been sketching dresses in my free time since I was 12. I even made a few basic tops from old bedsheets I found in the attic. For prom, I had envisioned something sleek, different, a navy silk piece with an asymmetrical neckline and subtle embroidery. I found a seamstress named Raina through a coworker at the bookstore I worked at after school. She said she'd do it for $300. I spent weeks saving up half of it and finally approached my mom at the kitchen island. "Can I talk to you?" I asked. She didn't even look up. Just kept scrolling on her iPad. "About what?" "I need help paying for my prom dress. I found a seamstress. It's $300 total. I've already saved up $150. She sighed. "Callie, I thought we talked about this. You're not really a prom type of girl." That sentence. It knocked the wind out of me. "But I want to go. I designed the dress." "It's not like I'm asking for $1,000. Her eyes flicked up briefly. "We've already spent enough with Brielle. It's just not something we can do twice. You understand." That was it. No discussion. No compromise. No "let's see what we can figure out." Just a decision already made without me in mind. The worst part? I overheard her telling Brielle later that night, "It's not like Callie's going to meet anyone at prom. It's better this way." That was when something inside me shifted. Not in a vengeful, Hollywood movie way. More like a slow, silent folding in of a part of myself that used to hope. I didn't go to prom. I lied and said I had a cold. I watched people's Instagram stories from my bedroom and cried into a pillow while I played old episodes of Project Runway. I told myself that one day, maybe, I'd design a dress for someone else's big night. Someone who had no one to believe in her, either. After that, I started doing everything on my own. Applied to SCAD behind my parents' backs. Got accepted. Took out student loans. Waited tables. Rented a room with peeling paint and a mattress on the floor. Still, it was mine. My life. On my terms. They didn't help with tuition. They didn't even come to move me in. I saw Brielle twice during college. Once during a family Christmas where she told me, laughing, that I had art kid energy. The second was when she unfollowed me on Instagram because, according to my cousin, my aesthetic was confusing. I was 21 when I moved to New York. I got an internship at a small but reputable design house, Giselle O'Rourke. It was unpaid, but I didn't care. I worked part-time in a fabric shop in the garment district. I learned how to match thread colors by memory, how to tell real silk from knockoff blends by touch. I stopped sleeping 8 hours a night. I started building my own small collection of sketches in my off hours. One night, I accidentally left my sketchbook open in the design studio. I thought I'd get scolded. Instead, the next morning, Gisela called me into her office. "Where did you learn to sketch like that?" she asked, flipping through the pages. "Mostly trial and error," I said, trying not to let my voice shake. She looked at me. "You've got something. Come style the next show." It was Fashion Week. The night of the show, I barely had time to breathe. I was running around backstage with bobby pins in my teeth and safety pins in my pocket. Hair, makeup, shoes, models, timing, it was chaos, but I loved every second. Then, in the middle of all of it, I heard a familiar voice. "Callie?" I turned. And there she was. Brielle. In a silky two-piece outfit, phone in hand, expression polished but surprised. She looked around like she'd walked into a thrift store by accident. "What are you doing here?" she asked, lips curling slightly. I didn't answer. She leaned in, smirking. "Stealing close now?" Before I could say a word, someone stepped between us. "She's our lead stylist," said Gisela, not even looking at her. "You're the influencer who kept DMing for free samples, right? We rejected your request last month." Brielle blinked. Stiffened. Gisela raised an eyebrow. "We don't do gifted PR to micro-influencers." And then she walked off. Brielle stood there, silent. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just turned back to my clipboard and kept working. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel like closure. Not revenge. Just a reset. For the first time, I wasn't the quiet one or the artsy disappointment. I wasn't invisible. I was undeniable. And that was only the beginning. I didn't hear from Brielle that night. She slipped out before the last look hit the runway. The next morning, though, I woke up to a text from my mom. Just a single sentence. "Brielle said you were at a fashion show?" Not congratulations. Not how did it go? Just the passive curiosity of someone who suddenly realized their invisible daughter might be doing something visible. I stared at that message for a long time. The old version of me might have typed a long response. Might have filled in all the blanks, explained every sacrifice I made, hoping it would somehow open her eyes or unlock affection. Instead, I left it unread. Because in that moment, it was clear, they didn't want to know about my life. They just wanted to make sure they hadn't missed something worth bragging about. A few days later, Gisela asked me to meet her for coffee. I thought it might be a post-show debrief, maybe a polite thank you. She sat down at the cafe in Soho, took one sip of her espresso, and said, "You ever think about launching your own line?" I blinked. "Like, a brand?" "A capsule to start," she said, nonchalant. "We'll support you. You've got an eye, and more importantly, you work like there is no tomorrow. We need that in this industry." That night, I went home, sat on the floor of my apartment, and cried. Not because I was sad. Not even out of relief. But because for the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was being seen. The next 6 months were a whirlwind. I named the capsule line Other Daughter. It was a joke at first. But it stuck. It felt honest. Every piece in the collection was inspired by a memory. A dark green velvet wrap dress inspired by the sofa I used to sit on while Brielle opened presents at every birthday party. A structured blazer with asymmetrical stitching that matched the dress I was never allowed to wear. A clutch bag lined in tulle, mimicking the texture of my childhood dress-up box, the one I shared with Brielle but was always told to clean up after. The campaign was small, intimate. Shot by a photographer I'd met during Fashion Week. Models were friends and interns. The lighting was soft, the styling raw. I wanted it to feel like you were peeking into someone's diary. And it worked. Fashion bloggers picked it up. A few boutiques in Brooklyn started carrying it. Then a magazine editor reached out, wanting to feature one of the dresses in an editorial titled Designers You Should Know. That's when Brielle reached out again. She messaged me on Instagram, "Hey. Just saw your line. So cool. Want to send me a piece to promote?" I stared at the message for a while, same as I had with Mom's text. This time I replied, "Sorry. We don't gift to micro-influencers." She didn't answer. 3 days later, she posted a vague Instagram story that said, "Some people forget where they come from. I guess fake success will do that to you." It didn't bother me. Not like it would have before. Because I knew where I came from. That was the whole point. That's what gave every stitch of fabric in my hands its power. What surprised me more was what happened next. My dad called. He never called. He was the background parent. Present, but mostly quiet. Always hiding behind a newspaper or an excuse. "Hey, Cal," he said, like it hadn't been over a year since we'd spoken. "Your mom and I were thinking of coming up to New York for a weekend. Maybe we could all grab dinner?" I didn't say yes. I didn't say no either. Instead, I said, "Let me check my schedule. I'm slammed right now with a new project." Which was true. Because at that point, Gisela had just brought me into a larger partnership. I was no longer the stylist. I was part of the brand. Part of the future. And I was finally starting to believe I belonged there. The thing about growing up ignored is that you become obsessed with proof. Proof you matter. Proof you're enough. But over time, I started to learn something more valuable. The only person who really needs that proof is you. Still, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't still angry sometimes. Especially when I saw old photos, prom photos, Christmases, family vacations I was cropped out of, both literally and emotionally. But now I had something they couldn't touch. Myself. My work. My name. A few weeks later, I was prepping for a trunk show in Manhattan, a small but significant event hosted by a boutique in Nolita that catered to emerging designers. It wasn't high profile like Fashion Week, but buyers would be there. Stylists. Editors. People who mattered. I was nervous. Even with everything I'd built, the imposter syndrome never left. It crept in during the quiet hours. Whispered that I was just the overlooked daughter who got lucky. That morning, I arrived early at the venue to set up. I laid each piece out with care, steaming wrinkles from the fabrics, double-checking tags, straightening hangers. Every item felt like a part of my past, reshaped and retold. Around noon, people began to arrive, slow at first, then steadily growing. At 1:42 p.m., I looked up and saw her. Brielle. She walked in like she owned the place, wearing a high-waisted beige coat and oversized sunglasses, even though we were indoors. She was flanked by two girls I recognized from her social media, girls with perfectly teased hair and two white teeth. For a moment, I froze. But only for a moment. She made a beeline for the table, glanced at the clothes, then at me. "Wow," she said, with a smirk. "This is cute." I knew her tone. It was the same one she used back in high school when I showed her a painting I was proud of. The same voice she used when she pretended to be supportive while carefully carving me down. But this time was different. I didn't flinch. I met her eyes and said, "Thanks." A lot of people seem to think so. She picked up one of the structured wrap tops and examined the tag. $340? You're joking, right? I smiled. We sold out of that piece online in 2 days. One of her friends leaned over. "Isn't this the one that was on that stylist's TikTok? The one who dressed Florence Kent?" Brielle looked slightly startled. I didn't offer more. I just returned to adjusting a mannequin's collar while Brielle awkwardly lowered the top back onto the rack. That moment might have seemed small. But to me, it was monumental. Because for once, I didn't need her to see me. She could think whatever she wanted. She could play the role of the dismissive sister, the one who once laughed at me for being a dreamer. But I wasn't dreaming anymore. I was doing. Later that night, I posted a photo from the trunk show, just me, smiling behind the racks, with a caption that read, "From forgotten to featured. Thank you for seeing me." It went modestly viral. An editor from Harper's Bazaar reached out that week. Wanted to do a piece on my journey. Family dynamics in fashion was how she phrased it. I agreed, carefully curating my story honest, but not bitter. I wasn't interested in dragging anyone through the mud. I didn't need to. Success speaks in a tone louder than resentment ever could. I started getting emails from girls who had felt invisible, too. Girls who weren't picked for homecoming or overlooked by their parents. Girls who had talent no one nurtured. And each one reminded me why I started. Why I stayed up those nights after class, sewing and sketching when everyone else went out. Why I kept showing up to unpaid internships. Why I held on to that little girl who once wanted nothing more than to wear a dress that felt like her. One email in particular stood out. It was from Raina, the seamstress. She said she'd seen my brand in a local article. She still had my old sketches tucked in a folder under her cutting table. "I always knew you'd do something special," she wrote. "That night you cried over your navy dress. I wish I could have done it for free. But I was struggling too. I never forgot you." I sat with that for a long time. It reminded me that even in the loneliest moments, someone saw me. Maybe not my family. But someone. A week after that, I got invited to be a guest lecturer at SCAD. Just a small talk in the fashion program's senior design class. I agreed, flew down to Savannah, and stood in the same building where I once cried in the bathroom between classes, wondering if I'd ever make it. I told the students to build what they wished existed. That sometimes, your pain becomes your blueprint. And that no one else has to believe in your vision if you do. Afterward, one girl came up and hugged me. "I'm the second daughter too," she whispered. I understood exactly what she meant. It wasn't long after the SCAD talk that my parents decided they were coming to New York. That's how my mom phrased it in the email. Not "we'd love to see you" or "we're proud of what you're doing," just a casual announcement that they'd be in town, like I was a pit stop on their itinerary. I stared at that email for a while. My first instinct was to ignore it. The second was to write back something sharp and unforgiving. But I didn't do either. Instead, I wrote, "I'm busy that weekend. But if you want to come by the studio Friday morning, I can show you around." The studio wasn't glamorous. It was a converted storage room above a co-working space in Brooklyn with uneven floors and a drafty window. But it was mine. I'd strung lights around the ceiling and hung sketches on the walls. It smelled like fabric and pencil shavings, and it had seen every high and low of the last 2 years of my life. They showed up right on time. My mom walked in first, wearing a camel coat and carrying the kind of handbag that could pay off my credit card balance. My dad followed, quiet as always, taking it all in. "This is where you work?" she asked, glancing around. I nodded. "Most days, yeah." She tilted her head. "It's cozy." I didn't offer her a chair. I didn't ask if they wanted coffee. I didn't fill the silence. For once, I let them sit in it. My dad cleared his throat. "We saw the article. The Harper's Bazaar one. That's something." "Thanks," I said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I've got it saved, actually." Showed it to a guy at work. Said, "That's my daughter." That surprised me. My mom gave a tight smile. "Brielle mentioned you were doing well. I guess, we just didn't realize how well." I didn't say anything. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't reopen old wounds. She looked around the room again, and then her eyes landed on a dress hanging by the window. It was the original navy design. The one I'd sketched for prom years ago, the same silhouette, refined and matured. Clean lines, silk draping, delicate stitching along the neckline. "You kept that design," she said softly. "I remade it," I corrected her. "Because I could." For the first time, her face shifted. Not guilt exactly, but something like it. Something heavier than she wanted to feel. Maybe she was remembering that conversation at the kitchen island. Or maybe she was just realizing how far away from me she'd been for so long. "We didn't know how to support you back then," she said after a moment. "You were always different." Different. I smiled, not unkindly. "Yeah. I was." "They didn't stay long. Said they had a show to catch." "My dad hugged me before they left." "My mom didn't. But she touched my arm briefly before turning toward the stairs." For her, that meant something. A few days later, Brielle made her next move. She posted a reel on Instagram her trying on a gown from another designer. In the caption, she wrote, "When your little sister becomes a stylist and forgets she ever wanted to be me." That one stung more than I expected. Not because it was mean, but because it reminded me that no matter how far I'd come, to her, I'd always be in the shadow of the person she believed herself to be. The comments were filled with the usual heart emojis and fire emojis from her followers. But a few stuck out. "Didn't she style for Giselle O'Rourke? Isn't she the one who got featured in Vogue? Looks like someone's jealous of their siblings' glow up." I didn't respond. But I noticed she deleted the post 2 days later. Instead, she DM'd me again. "Are you ever going to forgive me?" I read it 3 times. Closed the app. Came back. Reopened it. Reread it again. I didn't know how to answer that. Because the truth is, I didn't know if forgiveness was even what I needed. I wasn't angry the way I used to be. Not raw, not aching. But I wasn't healed all the way either. There were still places in me that remembered every birthday where I got socks while she got concert tickets. Every comment that started with "Brielle would never," followed by something I apparently always did wrong. But maybe, in some strange way, I didn't need her to say sorry. Maybe I just needed her to see me. For real, this time. I didn't reply to Brielle's message. Not right away. I left it unread for nearly a week. During that time, I poured myself into the next project, an editorial shoot with Moda Collective, a rising fashion magazine known for featuring designers who came from non-traditional backgrounds. They wanted to do a sisterhood and duality theme and asked if I had any interest in modeling in it myself, alongside one of my designs. At first, I laughed. Me? In front of a camera? I had spent most of my life trying to blend into backgrounds while Brielle learned how to find her light by age 6. But the creative director insisted. "It's part of the story," she said. "Your clothes are about reclaiming space. You deserve to take some too." So, I agreed. And I'll admit, on the day of the shoot, standing under those lights, I felt something I'd never really let myself feel before: power. Not the flashy, influencer kind. Not curated. Not filtered. But real. Quiet. Whole. I wore the navy dress, the first dress. The one I'd remade with silk sourced from Japan, hand-dyed in deep ocean tones, lined with invisible boning and stitched by my own hands. After the shoot, I walked home, shoes in hand, feeling light. Not like a girl who had finally won, but like a woman who had nothing left to prove. And that's when I knew what I wanted to say to Brielle. I opened the app. Found her message. "Are you ever going to forgive me?" I typed, "I don't know if forgiveness is the right word. But I'm not angry anymore. I'm not trying to be you. I never was. I just wanted to be seen. I see myself now. Whether or not you do, that's up to you." I hit send. No punctuation. No emoji. Just the truth. She read it within 10 minutes. No reply. Just seen. And that was fine. Because for the first time, I didn't need her to validate me. I didn't need her apology to rewrite our past. I had done that already, in sketches and stitches and long nights alone with fabric and vision. A week later, I was invited to present at an emerging designer panel hosted by Parsons. There would be buyers in the room. Press. Gisela would be there too, speaking on a mentorship segment. And unexpectedly my parents asked to attend. I was stunned. They sent a polite email, again formal, but with a note that caught my breath: "We'd love to be there to support you. We're proud of you, Callie." I didn't respond immediately. Part of me still carried that tight knot of protection around my chest. But I thought about it. And I decided to say yes. Because I was no longer protecting the version of me that needed their approval. I was protecting the one who had already learned how to thrive without it. When the night came, the room buzzed with energy. I had 20 minutes to present my line, talk about my story, and answer a few questions. I wore a slate gray wrap dress I'd made just for the occasion. Nothing too dramatic, simple lines, clean tailoring, understated strength. I spotted them in the audience. My parents, sitting in the second row. My mother's face was unreadable. My father looked stunned. They looked around at the audience, people leaning forward, listening, taking notes, some even nodding as I spoke about identity and growing up unseen. I don't remember every word I said. But I do remember how I ended. I used to think success would feel like applause. But for me, it feels more like clarity. Like choosing the fabric of your own story, every fiber, every thread, and knowing that no one else gets to decide what you're worth. They clapped. My parents clapped. Gisela hugged me backstage. A stylist from Milan asked for a follow-up meeting. I said yes. I said yes to all of it. That night, back at my apartment, I got a text from Brielle. Just one sentence. "You were incredible." I didn't reply. But I didn't delete it either. Maybe that was enough. The text from Brielle sat on my phone for days. "You were incredible." Not long. Not dramatic. No, I'm sorry, no, I was wrong. But also, not a performance. Just a sentence. Honest, maybe even a little raw. It didn't come with a selfie or an influencer-style emoji string. That alone made it feel different. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. Sometimes closure doesn't come with a dramatic confrontation or a grand apology. Sometimes it's just that one moment when the people who spent years overlooking you are finally forced to look right at you and see what they missed. About 2 weeks after the panel, I got an unexpected call. It was from Raina the seamstress. Her voice hadn't changed. Still soft, still slightly accented from her Colombian roots. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "I saw your line in that boutique in Soho. I told the girl working there I knew you before you were big." I smiled. "You were the first person who believed in me." She paused, then said, "You ever need help with a new collection, you know where I am." I thought about how far I'd come from that first sketch. From 17-year-old me crying alone on prom night while my sister spun in a crystal-studded gown bought with money I didn't dare ask for. And here I was building something real, something lasting, with people who respected the girl I'd been and the woman I was becoming. Then came the moment I never expected. I got invited to be the keynote speaker at a Charleston creative conference. Of all places. My hometown. The place I couldn't wait to leave behind. I said yes. Not because I wanted to prove anything. But because it felt right to return not as the overlooked middle child, but as someone who had taken every piece of disregard and made something beautiful from it. The event was held in a historic theater downtown. The kind with red velvet curtains and chandeliers from another era. My name was on the program. People had flown in for the event. Some were students. Some were fashion bloggers. One woman was a high school teacher who said she now used my story to talk to her class about identity. I stood backstage, holding a clicker for the slideshow, my palms sweating just a little. And then, I saw her. Brielle. She was sitting 3 rows back, alone. No entourage. No camera. Just her, looking up at the stage, her hands folded in her lap. For a second, I almost let the nerves get to me. But then I thought about how I'd gotten here not through shortcuts, not through followers, but through grit. Through late nights and frayed fabric and every no that pushed me closer to my own yes. I walked out. The spotlight hit. I smiled. And I told my story. From prom to Parsons. From being invisible to becoming undeniable. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. The room listened. And when I finished, people stood. Not everyone. But enough. When I stepped off stage, Brielle was waiting in the wings. I meant what I said, she told me quietly. About you being incredible. I nodded. Thank you. She opened her mouth like she was going to say more, but then just smiled small and genuine. And then, with nothing else, she walked away. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. But it was enough. A few months later, my brand was picked up by a global platform. I hired Raina as my production manager. I launched a mentorship program for young girls from underrepresented communities who wanted to break into fashion but didn't know how. I called it the Other Daughters Initiative. And I still have that original navy dress. I keep it in a glass garment bag in my studio. I don't wear it. I don't loan it out. I don't let stylists touch it. Because that dress? It's not just silk and seams. It's proof. Proof that sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't about proving them wrong. It's about proving yourself right. And loving who you became in the process.